Welcome, Reanimated fans, to this week's episode. I am H.A. Conrad, here with my intrepid co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Hello.
And we are celebrating, the fathers today. But, a couple of things to talk about. We actually have some news items today, which there's been a dearth of lately, so that's kind of cool. So we'll talk about those, and then we'll get into our recap review of Silo Series episodes 5 and 6. So that's The Janitor's Boy, and the Relic. But before we get to that, in other Silo news, it has been renewed, as probably some of you may know, for season 2. And I think Hugh Howey put up some kind of an observation on Twitter, which was not exactly a revelation. Do you want to
That
talk
actually
about that,
even
Stuart?
that like predated the announcement of the renewal, but
Yeah.
it's just this ongoing sort of series of observations where he points out that Guillermo del Toro has had 5 projects turned down in the last 2 months by studios. So, and in this tweet, Hugh Howey then just says, getting anything made is a miracle. So, I mean, even with a book series as popular as the Silo, the Wool series, I think he feels like he has a bit of a unicorn on his hands for right now. Because you don't think of Guillermo del Toro and like having trouble getting things made. You feel like that's a name that he could do almost anything. He's not like a Jim Cameron, but it's probably still a name that will sway studios. So to see that, I think, is pretty shocking. And also just another one of these, litmus things that shows you the health of the industry, which is to say,
Right.
it's bad.
It is, but I also think, Hugh Howey over the years, and since he self-published this, he had a lot of love for this. And I think, I vaguely, and I'd have to look back to see, but I vaguely remember his frustration in having the series made in the way he thought it should be made. So I think he was also very much wanting to make sure that it wasn't just like he's selling it off and somebody just kind of takes his vision and does what they want with it.
Yeah.
And maybe sort of portrays it in a way he is not excited about. So he is the executive producer on this, and I think just the way it's been interpreted and the slight changes they've made here and there have made total sense. But I also can see how it would take a lot to get something, off the ground. I mean, we even saw that with The Last of Us, that had been kicking around for many years before they finally
It took a Craig
got there.
Mazin level name
Right.
to get that made, and he I think had basically a blank check from HBO.
Right. And that's a rarity, but like that.
Totally preceded all this disastrous streaming stuff,
Right.
before they were writing off entire movies for tax purposes.
Right. And now it's like they're tightening the belt for sure.
This hit me finally personally on Disney Plus. There was a show called Mysterious Benedict Society based on a series of books.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
My son was super into the books, and we were watching
Mm-hmm.
the show really gradually. We were watching the 2 seasons that were on the. It stars a couple of really funny actors whose names I'm not remembering, but good. And a cast of young actors who were all really talented. Oh, and Beta was in it too. Ryan Hurst had a role. And that show has been taken off Disney Plus, which you don't. I mean, it's happening all over the place now.
Right.
Like,
And that's interesting because that book series has an incredible fan base, and just so many storylines that you could just kind of go to town with. Like, seems like it would have legs, and that's kind of depressing that something like that gets pulled, right?
yeah, and my son is getting really jaded and bitter at the industry too because of that show being taken off Disney Plus, which we hadn't finished watching the second season, and Wings of Fire, which is like this YYA, not even YK, maybe young kid book
Okay.
series about dragons. There's like 20 books. He's read all the books, and he got wind of the fact that a Netflix show was in the works, but they stopped production. And he's so mad at Netflix, and now he's so mad at Disney Plus. I don't know. Like, I feel like they might be wounding their future paying customers with some of these. I mean, obviously they're doing it for financial reasons. If they
Right.
But yeah, it sucks either way.
And speaking of, I mean, we've been talking about this, but Salem's Lot, and you found an article about this. But Salem's Lot has been delayed multiple times, and it was weird because there was like all this fanfare about it, and then suddenly it was quiet, and then suddenly it's like, oh, by the way, it's delayed. So
Which,
even
yeah.
again, and speaking of things that certainly have a fan base and an interest, and I mean, this is one of those projects where people have a very specific, either you have an attachment to the book or you have attachment to the film that had been made. And like just seeing what's been happening with it, it's like even this, which you would expect to have a bit of an easier time, has been delayed yet again. So,
Oh well,
so
yeah. It's honestly this article from Cinema Blend, and I clicked on it because I was like, Cinema Blend doesn't always give you
no, I
clickbait.
know this is regurgitating the
It's
same stuff
unfortunately
though.
it's a clickbait article. It's like, oh, what's happening with Salem's Lot? And then at the very end, they're
It's
like,
the same stuff.
it's probably going to be released on streaming around Halloween. But I'm like, yeah, there's no way you know that. And
No,
also,
they don't. They're just making stuff up.
yeah.
So,
So, and it's if it's on WB, that this is the streamer with the worst track record of
yep,
deleting things for tax purposes. So there's, I would say like, I don't know, 50-50, you ever get to see it again. And if you do, it'll be on
yep,
streaming.
yep.
So that
But
sucks.
anyway,
And maybe we'll get to see Salem's Lot one day, but
hmm.
don't hold your breath.
And speaking of clickbaity articles,
Hey,
which like,
this one was okay because I think
eh,
we agree. I think we could agree with most of these
yeah,
picks.
I do agree. I just thought it was like, what an odd article to put out
Yeah.
there. But cool, cool. It's basically what we're talking about. There's an article about the Walking Dead characters that were wasted potential. And, for a lot of them they start out strong, or I think there were many ways that the storyline could have gone with them. It would have made the show a lot richer. I think I definitely agree with Beth, Jesus, and Abraham. Um,
Abraham
Tyrese.
though? Like,
Well,
okay, some of
Abraham
these I think they got their stories. They
Abraham got
got
his
some
story, but it's
stories.
like they kind of couldn't decide what to do. Same thing with Tyrese. Tyrese, I feel like they did not take. I think Abraham got more of the full potential, but I feel like Tyrese is somebody that it was like just when it started to get interesting, they like yanked him off the show. And I don't know. I mean, in some of these cases, maybe it's something, maybe it had to do with like the actors' contracts and things like that. But Tyrese was one that I was really like, oh, you just did not do enough with that character like you should have, and that would kind of bum me out. I don't know. And then Carl's the obvious one, but Carl is like its own special something. I don't know. Um,
Carl
because
was for other reasons, yeah. But
yeah,
so the way that they've organized this list too is one of the interesting things. It's like from 10th to first, right? And the first one or
yeah,
the 10th one is Henry. I would say both of
yeah.
those kids kind of got a little bit wasted, but they were also both there really to influence Carol's storyline.
Right. And then the
Yeah,
other thing is, I mean, this is often the gripe we have in general, but just about how kids are written, and
yeah.
they didn't seem to know what to do with them on the show, and they always kind of infantilize them or make them either too adult or too young, and it's just never realistic. And then it's almost like they don't know what to do with them, so then they just kill them off or make their storylines really minimal. So I think that's especially what happened with Lydia. Like she had kind of like a cool main storyline for a while, and then they kind of like just let that peter out.
Yeah, she had
And
nothing. Like she was
yeah.
basically just defined by her relationship with her mother, and as soon as that was
Hmm.
done, she was like, "Okay, we're done."
Yep.
And what's interesting here is that they're missing the other teenage girl who was Carl's sort of love interest for a minute. What was her
I don't
name?
remember her name though.
Just survived somehow, girl, the one who ate a turtle. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
like she basically, I think she started dating someone. Like she started having an adult relationship, and she was killed by the Whisperers. Yeah, in one of those
Oh,
scenes.
okay.
But she at least had some story arc. Jesus basically had nothing. I'm not surprised that guy quit the show.
Yeah.
Um, Beth had one story arc. Most of the time, she was just there to sing, and it was a really good one in that hospital. And it was a bummer that she died, but I feel like they actually did that pretty well. It's just that it was so clear that she was wasted on the show up until that point. So
Yeah,
that
and I mean, I thought that there would be more interesting things, like instead of making it just the Carol Daryl thing, because there was definitely that relationship between Daryl and Beth that I thought was kind of interesting.
yeah, which
Um,
they'd only really worked on that season, also.
right. And Jesus also, it's like he came out really strong out of the box. He was like this cool character, and then
It was
yeah,
almost too cool. Like he
yeah,
had
like they almost like just oversold it. But
I mean,
yeah, like
using
I just
kung
think
fu on zombies, super cool for Walking Dead. Like, not something you see very much. And then they basically just, yeah, okay. Oh, you're gay. Okay, that's interesting. Are you gonna have a relationship? No, you're just gonna
no,
die.
I know. It's sort of like, okay, that's just not. Anyway, so
And then number one is Andrea, and we've talked a
yep,
lot about this.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean, this is like the biggest disservice that they've ever done to Robert Kirkman. Just
agree.
taking this super cool character and making her as useless as they did. We don't need to go back down that road. We've
No.
trodden that path many times. But what a bummer for
Well, and one
fans.
of the things I should point out with Andrea, especially with Beth, with Lydia, all these female characters, if you're talking about like their storylines, like these were cool characters that you could have built out and made a lot more independent. Like it doesn't just have to be the Carol or the Michonnes in the world. Like it's seeing these like different kind of perspectives. And it really felt like, and again, this is a big cast. I know it's hard to give everybody a bit of, it's hard to give everybody those storylines because they're trying to weave all these things together. But I do like the Andrea one was the one I felt was just so just weak and wasted, and she just became this incredibly strange, and I don't know, it was just not, it was definitely not what that character should have been, and certainly not what she was in the
No.
books. So
If anything, this list
um
needs to be like 4 times as long, because I'm
yeah,
also
honestly.
thinking, I'm thinking of, I mean, we see now Avi Nash, and we couldn't remember his character's name a few weeks ago, but
I know.
Sadiq also
Sadiq,
kind of
yeah.
like dies in this weird way in one of the
Mm-hmm.
last seasons of the Prime show. And there's Heath. There's so
Yeah.
many characters that
Heath.
just sort of
Heath
showed up.
disappeared and there's all the mystery about him, right? Like
Yeah.
so. But especially with and I do think that for Carl, for Sadiq, for a lot of these characters, when they are written off or when they die or whatever, the thing that's really hard for me to deal with is that these people have been out here surviving and suddenly they're unable to take care of themselves out in this world. And
Mm.
that, especially with Carl and Sadiq, really made me mad because it's like, you could have written it in a way that made a lot more sense. You know what I mean? Like you could have done it in a way that sent them out in a like, we have no idea how Carl got bitten. That didn't even make sense.
Hmm.
Um and then it's just like, well, it's, to me it's just not honoring the characters they are. And Sadiq was like, he had been out there surviving forever, and I don't know. So it annoys me, but I
He
guess such
didn't
is
he
the.
died in an okay way, and I guess they wanted to kill someone significant because
I
of
know, but still, come
yeah, it
on.
just felt like there were people who'd been on the show longer who could have just killed off, but they chose to kill off this guy who'd been on the show for like 2 seasons.
Yeah, but
um
he was so good, and he had that whole thing with like, I don't know. I
oh,
just,
that baby daddy triangle thing going on.
yeah, but I just liked him in terms of the care of the people as a doctor in this world, and taking him out like that to me it didn't make sense, but
After
all
a
good.
while,
I'll
yeah, the doctor death toll is just
right.
absurd on that show. And then the one name on this list that I'm like, I actually kind of don't agree with is Axel. Who cares?
Yeah. I thought that was odd, but
Like, yeah, you're a little bummed when he gets a headshot from a mile away by the governor, but also he's, okay. The prison, we didn't really expect the prisoners to hang out that long. He stuck around like one episode longer than the rest of the
right.
prisoners on the cast. But that's okay. That kind of rounds out that list. It's interesting. It makes you think a little bit, but it also makes you think, well, I would have maybe made it a list of 50
Right,
characters
true. True.
who were done dirty.
Mm.
So yeah, that's that list. It's on Cinema Blend. Nope, that's no, it's on
No, that's
movieweb.com.
movie web.
And then finally, we have this article that is actors on actors from Variety, and it's two of our favorite people. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
interviewing each other. It's Stephen Yoon and Pedro Pascal. Did you have a chance to read through this?
I did read through it and I thought it was really funny. They both are very much fans of each other, which is kind of adorable. And just talking about sort of their experiences. One of the most significant pieces of this, though, is their discussion about road rage in LA, which seems pretty bad.
Hmm. On
And
420, anyway.
yeah, and it sounds like, that show Beef that Stephen Ewan is really, I don't know, hitting. checking off some boxes for some people, but I, recently, just even this week, I think there was an article that came out about air rage, which is how a lot more people have been like sort of acting out on flights, which to me is really terrifying just because you're kind of in a closed space with people and you can't really get away from them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure, like, maybe it's because things are out of control and people want things they can control, and I don't know, but what they are describing in terms of like people like spitting out their windows and things like that. I don't know. Have you experienced this on the West Coast, Stuart, or are you not out there enough to see it?
Yeah, every so often you witness a little bit of it. It happens.
I guess the equivalent here in New York would be maybe the subway rage because I'm just not on the road enough to see it. But
Wasn't there
and it's
just
like the same.
a trial that resulted in a murder charge against somebody for killing a guy on
Yeah,
a?
it's not a trial yet. But yes,
Was that in New York?
it is in New York. There was a I think unhoused man who clearly had some mental
Yeah,
health issues and supposedly was
civilian put him in a
threatening somebody,
headlock or
but
something.
then this other rider put him in a chokehold and killed him basically.
Yeah.
And I have to say, based on there is a video of it, and I would say like the charges are absolutely warranted. But there's also a lot of stuff going on, just like, somebody basically stabbed somebody just the other day and killed them. There's been a lot of violence on the subways, and so there's a bigger police presence there. And, I think that you're just seeing an uptick in sort of this acting out overall, everywhere. And this has been definitely a post-pandemic phenomenon. So I don't have an answer for it, but it's definitely people are a little bit more on edge
Hmm.
overall. But hopefully we can all work through this um, in a better way. I mean, I do think it's, especially with the New York subways, one of the biggest issues is that um, the pandemic put a lot of people that need help and like over the edge, and so there's a lot more unhoused people just out in the street and walking around, and people that definitely need help, and there just doesn't seem like there's enough resources to help them.
Hmm.
And so you see a lot more you see a lot more of these kinds of incidents everywhere. It's not just on the subway. So um, I don't know what the answer is going to be. I mean, there's a lot of discussion surrounding it, and there's been a lot more outreach. I don't think this is the only city dealing with it. It seems like San Francisco and other cities have it as well. But I think it's something that we as a society probably have to figure out because it's not like it'll go away. Definitely won't go away without treatment,
Well,
So,
Sonoma County actually just had a 22% decrease in our
oh,
homeless
that's
point in
great.
time count, mostly because we're building housing and buying hotels and turning them into housing and doing a lot of transitional housing work. But it needs to happen because there's a
Right. Well,
huge proportion, like disproportionate number of homeless on this coast
well,
because the
there's
weather tends to be less killing to be
right.
unhoused.
Well, and I mean, I think if, in New York and San Francisco, all that, the housing crisis is for reals. Like, so there's just, a lot of people who were on the edge before the pandemic. And I think that probably the increase recently has been that there was an expiration of a lot of the eviction sort of moratoriums that had been put in place to sort of protect people during the pandemic. So landlords have been taking advantage of that and been like, okay, you're out now. So I think that there's just more people that are looking for housing, and there isn't a lot available. And in addition to that, there's just like, it's kind of weird. Like the cities are trying, like, it's odd because there's like a lot of court like real estate, like non-residential housing, not housing, non-residential buildings that are just vacant right now, because it's still like people are coming back from the pandemic. So it'll be interesting to see all of that. But that is to say that that was the interesting part of the article, that the Pedro Pascal and Stephen Yoon, they were also talking about acting methods or things that they do. And
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting because Pedro Pascal was saying that he doesn't like to watch himself as much anymore as he used to. Like he used to kind of do that to see things that he would change, but
the reasoning for that was interesting, because he's like, I don't like to watch my performance because it gets edited into something I don't even recognize most of the time.
Right.
And that takes me out of it, and it makes it
Hmm.
like harder to do the job the next time. I thought that was actually quite relatable. A lot of the time when actors talk about their craft, it can get really abstract. But that one
Right.
actually I was able to pick up on. And I also like the story about they were talking about how much they knew their source material for Walking Dead and for
Hmm.
Last of Us. And Stephen Yoon said that he went into Walking Dead not knowing a lot of, I guess, about the genre, but then when Last of Us came out, he played the hell out of it
Yep.
and went to set like a changed man. And then so he was a big fan of the video game before the show came out.
But Pedro Pascal was not. So
Right.
he was just, he knew nothing about it. I thought there was also a really sweet section where they were talking about Bella Ramsey, and Pedro Pascal is like, he says this in all of the interviews, it's just that it wouldn't have been the same show without them. And that they are just, in terms of their acting experience and things like that, he really admires them and their just their maturity and their like the vulnerability. And I think everybody can agree when you see the two of them together that they really, that made it, that whole rapport between them was really visible.
Hmm.
So I thought that was kind of a cool little section.
Well, now what I want is to see a zombie project with both Pedro and Steven.
Oh yeah,
And I
definitely.
feel and
Absolutely. This was like a cool interview to read through, so I definitely recommend it.
yeah.
All
Well,
right.
maybe season two of Last of Us, Steven, there's a role that I could imagine Steven Yeun playing in that.
Mm,
However, onwards and into the silo, onwards and downwards, 144 floors.
mm-hmm.
The Janitor's Boy. This is directed by David Semmel and written by Graham Yost, who is the showrunner. It's the second and last episode that he writes this season, which I found
Mm-hmm.
to be an interesting thing. It's episode 5. Like usually these guys write the last one and the
Yep.
first one, or the first one and like some sort of huge set piece. There's not a huge set piece going on here. I mean,
Mm-mm.
kinda, but not really. What do you? Yeah. What were your takeaways from the episode?
Well, I really liked, again, I like how they sort of give you this information and you're trying to piece it together about different ways that things are happening in the silo, who knows what. Juliet often in this is just figuring out all the inner workings, and she's at a disadvantage. I mean, she came up from mechanical, and this isn't her bag. Like, she doesn't, she's not like part of this intrigue, and there's a lot about who she can trust and who she can't. And her ally, or who she thought might become her ally, is dead now. And so it's really like, and you're seeing sort of the inner workings of judicial and um like the and we see it not just like through Juliet's eyes, but you get to see a couple of other things. And so the one of the biggest things is like the characters that you're just trying to figure out in this is, and we've heard about him up until now you finally get to see him, but Paul Billings is what was the choice that judicial had to be actually in Juliet's place, and they're like, well, now he's going to be your chief, now he's going to be your chief deputy, and she's just got to deal with that.
And he has all this judicial background.
Mhm.
You don't really know what to make of him. By the end of the second episode, I feel like we are very sympathetically drawn to Paul Billings.
Yep.
Father's Day is a great day to talk about Paul Billings'
Yep.
character. He seems to be a dad. He seemed like by the end of the second, like the Relic episode. But when we first meet him, we know that he is tight with Sims and
Mhm.
Bernard. They wanted him to be sheriff, and it takes a while to really get a sense of him. But I feel like the guy playing him, and who is that, is doing this like super nice job of like a I don't know, like what are his mannerisms? He seems like mild mannered.
And very inoffensive, and you can kind of see how he was able to, like, they think he's harmless, they think he's easily controllable. He never says the wrong things generally, like he's very careful about the information that he imparts. And so it makes it this is just like I think he's a pretty cool character.
And he's played by
So
Chinaza Uche, a
mhm,
Scottish-born actor based in the U.S. So he might actually have a real American accent, but he's
maybe.
one
Who
of the
knows?
minority on this cast for
Yep.
sure.
And then
Yeah,
we also have a little bit more interaction with Sandy. And Sandy, who has been very, very clear about her dislike of Juliet all throughout this, basically tells Juliet that she needs her help and that she'll help her if she helps figure out who Sam's killer is. And she gives her like some very specific information. Like she's just like, if you don't figure out who it is, Judicial's going to pit it on somebody who didn't do it, and that would be against what Sam's moral compass was, and you should do the right thing. And so that I thought was like an interesting exchange between the two of them. And they're, I wouldn't say they're frenemies, they're sort of uneasy allies by you know um just by virtue of the situation. So
yeah.
but Sandy's comments make Juliet look a little bit more closely at what's happening and think about the whole situation in a sort of a wider, like a little bit, like kind of stepping away from it and trying to see what the big picture is. And it's kind of cool because you can see her frustration because she doesn't fully understand the whole big picture, but she's trying very hard.
The
um
Sandy's actions in this episode also just kind of paint like the maybe the reality of the up top, which is everything's political. Even Sandy
mhm,
is being political here in her
mhm,
own way by manipulating Nichols
mhm.
to like dig in harder on this investigation and like take Paul with you. He knows the pact. Like she's guiding the sheriff, but she's also like one foot out the door, because she's kind of just had enough. But even everything that's going on here, you get the sense that this wasn't how it was in Mechanical, right? Like she's down there punching Coop, getting drunk. That was apparently an aberration. Just taking care of business. There's not a lot of like interpersonal politics, but up here, that's like almost all there is.
As you discover, or as Juliet discovers certain things that are happening, um it's it's almost like every single thing she uncovers like five more things, five more mysteries. And it's sort of like, and which is sort of satisfying, but it is like, there's like this look on her face like, oh my gosh, like, like I can't believe there's even more. She went up to solve George's death, and it turns out that this is just the tip of the iceberg, and that actually has, there's something bigger going on. So you know I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And she did, when she had the chance, like she does do things and kind of pushes boundaries. So she has to be alone with Lawrence's body, um and finds that, the little slip of paper in the hand. um and
There's not a whole. I mean, what's on there is what Doris Kennedy, like probably Patrick
yeah,
Kennedy's
it's
wife's.
circled and it seems a little and and
That's
again,
not
like
new
this.
information for her. They'd already gone to look for her the day before. So I don't feel
Right.
like she's looking at this and thinking, "Oh, now I've got it." It's like, that's nothing
No, I
really to
think
her.
she finds it more like this seems like kind of convenient, and so she just wants to find out more.
Right.
So, and then in addition to this is also like she's part of this whole council talking about how to deal with the death of Marnes and John's rather. And um it's like she sees how they are spinning this story to be, something so that they can still maintain control of the population. So
Yeah.
it's a pretty
Bernard
easy.
Bernard is very free with saying things like, "Who cares about the pact?"
Right.
Like or certain situations where it makes things politically more expedient. There's also some great world building in this episode between the
Hmm.
funeral, which is
Yep.
actually her idea. Then they like spin it into a thing like with the music and the apples. I felt like
Yep.
that was a huge waste of food, but
It
maybe they
was
got
actually, I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, would they have really done this? Seems like a pretty big waste, but okay.
but they're burying their bodies in the orchard on an orchard level in the silo. I love this detail. Hopefully they don't just continue to dig up old bones, or maybe not everybody gets buried. I don't know, but that's cool. And then there's the race to the top, which
Mhm.
is you got to think that the Silo residents too, they just had Freedom Day, or maybe it was a month or two ago, and now they're doing another event, and then in the next episode there's another, like, what's it called, forgiveness holiday.
Yep.
It's like they're getting hit one after another with these very calculated attempts to like raise morale. But I thought it was a cool piece of world building where they have a bunch of people with numbers on themselves running from 144 all the way to the top, and of course that intersects with a an action chase scene. I guess that might be the
Mhm.
set piece when I'm talking
I
about
think
like,
that's the set piece. But there's also, there's a lot of like sort of putting together puzzle pieces. So,
yeah,
and it's interesting because Juliet's trying to do this without tipping off Billings because she doesn't know if she can trust him. So supposedly they go off to like find out or sort of explore, is there evidence linking, she doesn't tell him exactly what she's up to, and then
and
he
he
like
doesn't
has
tell her, but he does admit that he went to judicial
later
right
he
after.
does, but before he tells her, she's like, oh, you should go have lunch with your family and whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
what she's actually doing, she goes and checks out Kennedy's apartment. She finds some evidence, but then she's putting something together in her head, which is that Kennedy has not actually lived in this apartment for a while. Like it's because his wife had died, so they moved him to like a single quarters, and it's actually like this old couple. So somebody planted this evidence thinking Kennedy lived there. Um, and so she realizes that indeed they are trying to frame the wrong person. And she also has been given this like weird information that somebody else entirely is to blame for all this, and is thinking about Sandy's comment that some poor guy is going to get blamed, but also that they're trying to make her look bad, planted in Kennedy's thing, and say that he's the real person. So
Yep.
it's an interesting little game of cat and mouse that is going on here. And she's got to stay kind of a step ahead of it.
But she's at such a disadvantage, and
Yep.
that's kind of the sense you get, is she is just working on for like time basically, and she's talking about by the end of the second episode, she's talking about being like, I gotta get out of here. Even in,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, she's trying to quit already, but because I think she does feel that the deck is stacked against her,
Mm-hmm.
even though she feels like she's making progress in some ways. It's a great trick that she pulls on judicial here, but it also, I feel like, is getting her into their sights more and more every
She
time
is. She
every
is. She's
time she
becoming a lot
outmaneuvers.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and sort of in the midst of all this, she does run into Lucas again, who's been, there's like little weird respites where, she's trying to run down this mystery, and then she keeps running into Lucas in the cafeteria. So of course he's going to be a significant piece of this.
Yeah. I mean, if
It
you've read the book or if you've looked at the book synopsis lately, Lucas is a major
Oh
character.
yeah, of course he is. I'm just saying, like from the viewpoint of somebody who doesn't know that. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's pretty clear that he is, and again, he's talking about the movements of the lights in the sky,
Yeah.
which are the stars, and it's like, oh, how much have they lost? And that gives you also a little bit of a window into
Hmm.
what the world is in the silo. It doesn't seem like they have much history, and that's been kind of forbidden. So they've lost a lot of science and other things. And that's kind of an interesting little tidbit of information. And then
She goes down to the she goes all the way down. She takes
right,
a couple days off toward the end of
right.
the episode. I mean, she's also been like, she's gone after Trumbull, and he's tried to throw her off the stairs, which was
Mm-hmm.
a bit fraught.
Yep.
But
He breaks
eventually
his finger.
breaks his finger to get, and then gets pulled up by some of the runners.
Yep.
Like, you know, Trumbull obviously not the best or the most subtle member of judicial. And I think Sims sees that later, and after accepting him as his shadow,
Kills
um
him.
throws him over the side. Another person thrown over the stairs.
Yep.
Like, it feels like it's raining people.
It's raining
But
men.
and then so she takes a couple of days off and goes down. Also, Hank came all the way up from all the way at the bottom earlier on the day of the funeral to give her like a message from Walker. I don't remember exactly what it was, but
Basically,
most.
he's like, why are you up here? You need to come back down. This is dangerous. And that's like,
Mm,
he's worried for her. And I guess the people down below are worried for her,
that's
walkers
true.
especially, because
I,
they know that there's something weird going on. Um, and so she's kind of considering that. And I mean, look, you even just see the sort of interactions with Sims and Billings, with Sims and Trumbull, and then Sims actually has this whole like monologue about being the janitor's boy and discovering that, his dad was actually this had a different job, like he pretended to be the janitor, but this was he was part of this sort of shadowy organization that keeps the silo running. And I have to say, Trumbull's not the sharpest. If you don't like the Sims character, like I feel like Common does such an extraordinary job here at walking this line. Like, but I would have been nervous if he had been talking in this way. He's talking about suddenly, and it's like it's almost like he's got Trumbull eating out of his hand about
Well,
like,
when he
oh, I'll make you
says
my apprentice.
yeah, when he
And
says the thing about like you screwed up really badly. Hey, but you know what? So did I. I've screwed up
yeah,
really badly too. I'll be like, okay, cool. No, he's not going to throw me off the stairs. It's cool. Everything's cool. But
yeah,
then,
no, I mean it's really just done so well. Like he's such a good character, such a good
yeah,
actor,
yeah.
and even and I like when you said, "Oh, now I'm gonna make you my apprentice," I was like, "No, he's not. No, he's not." And like totally. And I mean, you don't really like the character of Trumbull anyway, so I guess it's not heartbreaking, but it does show you how manipulative Sims is and what he will do to protect whatever this organization is or whatever the mission might be. And I guess the thing about I was a little bit surprised that they allowed Trumbull to sort of hang out this long since he had screwed up so badly previously. But anyway, so he's gone. And
Yep.
then we've got, you know, kind of the Juliet figuring out what her next move is going to be.
Yeah, which
And
I still like having watched beyond these episodes, I'm still not 100% sure that this was a good choice, but she goes to get a Pez dispenser relic to try to use it as bait in order to
yeah,
like get more information out of judicial.
right. And
It seems like a
you know
really
that
risky move.
right. And she has this whole exchange with Walker about is it in this one or the next one? The
Yeah,
rules
it's in
of the
this one.
silo, which is and this is something obviously I think you have to wonder about, but it's like that there's no mechanical way to get up and down the steps. That's part of the pact. And also there's no level of magnification beyond a certain point, which is an interesting rule to have, right?
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know.
Especially
There's
when those are the only two like specific rules, that raises all kinds of questions. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, huh. And then, I just think she's still trying to kind of figure out the I don't know, she's trying to figure out what the next move is, and then the idea of like taking a page out of Trumbull's book, planting evidence somewhere to kind of keep the investigation open for George's death is sort of where she's going with this. And then the next episode, I think, is with the exchange with Bernard and everybody.
Uh-huh.
Um,
And this
and
one is
this
called
is
The Relic. It's
mhm,
directed by Bert and Bertie, which are like stage names for these two director ladies. What's most notable about this, not only this, but the fact is that they directed the pilot of Dead
mhm,
Island, which I think is kind of interesting.
yeah.
So yeah,
Um,
they're the directors, written by Eric Avellino.
yeah, and so this is, we get to see sort of the aftermath of her planning the relic, and she very deliberately does it in a way that Billings finds it. And then she's doing this whole thing about they are poor Bill, not poor Billings, but Billings very much like buys this and was like, okay, but is very disturbed by Juliet's behavior because you're supposed to hand over these things within a certain amount of time. She's definitely not following protocol. But there's a lot, so there's a lot of sort of back and forth between these two just about trust. Um, and kind of a continuing theme throughout this episode is like, oh, he's like, oh, why won't you trust me? It's like, well, you've been the person that's been kind of put into this place. um and there's something else that happens that she reveals later on in the episode, which is why she doesn't fully trust him.
Well, that's
But
just leverage that she has against him
yeah, it
more than
is, but
anything.
it's also, she makes a good point because he knows the pact. Like Billings knows the pact. He comments on it. He talks about protocol, all the things that you're supposed to do, and basically is like, oh, I'm very much by the book. And then it's revealed that he has the syndrome, which is basically almost like a degenerative medical condition that people seem to get in the silo, and it disqualifies you from having these positions of power. You're not supposed to be able to be like a sheriff or a deputy or any of these things, and he's been hiding it. How he's been hiding it, given how many eyes and ears seem to be all over the place, makes me think that he isn't really hiding it. But
what's interesting
um
is that in the janitor's boy episode, they meet a guy. This is where they introduce the syndrome. They meet
mhm,
like someone they're questioning, and he has his hand in his jacket pocket and then pulls it out, and you see his tremor.
mhm.
And Billings has his hand in his jacket pocket in almost an identical way. Like you see
Yep.
it in this episode. And I thought that was a really good piece of direction, even though
Yeah.
it's two different directors. So I thought that was cool.
So you have like this back and forth between these two that is really cool because again, you're kind of seeing it from her perspective. She has no idea who to trust, but Billings is such a like sympathetic character. He seems very trustworthy. He seems very much on the up and up, and so it's kind of hard not to trust him. But you've got to be like have some self-preservation, and she definitely does because they do this whole thing where they have presented this relic as being found in Trumbull's apartment, and there's this whole confrontation between Bernard and Sims and Billings. They're all in the room and talking about it, and basically Sims has said, "Oh, well, we've tracked this down. We know it was like part of George's possessions." And Bernard covers for her, and it's very clear that he thinks he's lying on her behalf, I think. And says, "Oh, well, couldn't Trumbull have been part of the team that recovered this? Couldn't he have taken it?" And this is the like, it's a very mysterious support that Bernard has for Juliet because you don't trust it because he was so vehement about not putting her in the sheriff's place, that she was a thief, that she stole this heat tape. Like he says this multiple times to Barnes,
Mm-hmm.
or Marnes rather, and like then for him to be stepping up and supporting her here, it's like, well, what's changed and what advantage does he get from doing this?
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting exchange, and she kind of gets out of this by like the skin of her teeth. um
it's
and
it's
she
it's also real counterpoint to Sims, who's just like boiling over
mm-hmm,
and wants to, like, as soon as they even produce this Pez dispenser in Judge Meadows' office, who we finally get to meet in this episode. um he is just this presence in that office
mm-hmm,
that is unsettling, and the judge looks to him and asks him questions maybe a little more than a boss would, I feel like. And he is immediately, he looks at the Pez dispenser and says, that's not Trumbull's. Like he just
mm-hmm.
knows this. It was interesting. Yeah, that in confrontation between, not even confrontation, that meeting between the sheriffs and the judge, and then the subsequent meeting with the mayor and Sims. It is a very interesting counterpoint for Bernard to come in and kind of save the day. And Billings really takes her to task for kind of
Mm-hmm.
throwing him under the bus.
Yep.
Which is when he says, I've got a family, I've got a kid. And then we get to meet them as he like delicately goes downstairs, and his wife doesn't even want him holding the baby. His hands are shaking so much.
Yep.
It's
um
a mess.
and then we also have, I mean, then the other sort of significant sort of confrontations within this are
Mm.
with Nichols and
Miss Jackson.
Regina, who is the person that had, she's a relic dealer, and it turns out was also George's lover. Um,
Yeah.
and and
I'm
it turns
wondering about
out,
the casting of this actor. She's so pretty.
yeah,
They try to make her into like a crazy cat lady. I'm like, I'm not buying it. She's too
she's still
pretty.
really beautiful, yeah. Um, and the cool thing is that we get to see two different interactions between Juliet and Jackson. The first one is like she's stonewalling them. she really just is like, I'm not going to give you this information. And then she goes back again to confront her alone. There's a lot that, it's almost like Juliet doesn't want, like, it is revealed definitely, because it's like there's a realization between the two women, like once Regina realizes that Juliet is from Mechanical, who Juliet is, and she sees the watch on her, so she knows who she probably is, and is really needling her. And Billings is definitely, he's aware that now that George was Nicole's lover, and doesn't say anything, but like there is definitely that sort of like a thing where he doesn't reveal something that could definitely be advantageous to him to reveal.
Yeah.
Um,
Remember when
and
Holston told her to stop wearing the watch because even if it is
yeah,
legal, it draws attention? And then two people call it out in this episode. Sims
right.
does too. And like it does only seem to get her into trouble. I don't know.
Like, why are you continuing to wearing this thing that sort of exposes you as this, having this attachment?
Yep.
And then in the second interaction with Jackson finally breaks down and is basically like, you don't understand like all the danger. And this is like, she implies that there is like another sort of underlying thing, that there's eyes and ears everywhere.
Well, she
We've
seems
seen
completely batty in this
Yeah, she
interaction.
does, but like she turns on this fan. Not that I think that that would help all that much, especially if there's eyes and ears everywhere. Like, how are you going to keep things secret if it's like that all knowing? And basically talks about this man that came in the middle of the night, threatened all of Jackson's loved ones, basically said that they would like send everybody out to clean. Um, and that, Regina felt that she had sacrificed everything for George, and didn't, she did eventually give up his name because it seemed like they already knew about it, but she like says that there's something that she had from him that she didn't give up. And then this is the whole big reveal, like this big artifact that people die just for being known to have it. It turns out to be this children's travel book about Georgia.
Well, she said he
Before
died because he didn't give up the hard drive. Like, so they're openly
Right.
talking about the hard drive now too,
Right.
which I found to be quite interesting.
Yeah, me too. And
But
then
I'm sure the book is, yeah, with pictures of like rivers and grassy fields, is probably.
and
It's
manatees or
funny.
dolphins or whatever it is, and
This
yeah.
is a difference from the book. I have been trying to reread it, but I'm taking it's going slow a little bit because I keep falling asleep. But not because the book is not, a page burner, but I'm a tired person apparently.
Yeah.
They talk about having picture books in the schools that show scenes of outside,
Hmm.
with grass and just sunny fields. So they've purposefully gone away from that for,
Right.
but
So
like
that was the part I was going to say, like they've
yeah,
definitely altered that.
we've gone a bit, yeah, and maybe they're doing that to really draw that stark comparison between what's been lost.
Right.
So
And to also sort of emphasize how much information is being controlled.
yeah.
So that's, that was kind of what I thought it was. And then even freakier. And then I will say that this reveal made me wonder how anything is really happening or anybody's getting away with anything. But there's this whole thing when, you're wondering what Juliet's going to be looking at. It turns out to be this children's book. And then we see that she's being watched. She's being watched by camera. There's like cameras all over the place. They see exactly what she's doing. In fact, they're seeing her looking at this. Basically, they're like, oh, you got to wake up Simmons. Like, that's how important this
Well,
particular
they
bit of
don't say
information is.
Sims, but they are like, go wake him up.
Well, we know
But
who they're
yeah,
talking about. It's
yeah,
either Sims or Bernard, I suppose. I assumed it was Sims, but maybe I'm
yeah.
wrong.
We
Um,
can draw that. Yeah, when that reveal happened, I mean, it's very Lost in a way. Doesn't it feel a little bit like one of those sort of scenes where
oh,
you draw
totally.
the
But when they
you
show
zoom
this, and
back
it's
and
like,
suddenly you're coming out of a screen.
and the screens that they're showing of these like people monitoring, there's screens everywhere.
Yeah.
So like the fact that anything could be kept secret in this seems unlikely. I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, so I'm very curious to see what happens in the next, and there's only 8 episodes to the series, right?
There are 10.
But that's the yeah, so that's the thing. that I'm wondering about is where, and it's so funny that you mentioned Lost, because part of what I thought after seeing the end of this episode is like, oh, how are they going to wrap this up in like a few episodes? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm concerned a little bit too. I mean, it feels like this is just the first book. That's what they're doing here. And there's 3 books.
Hmm. Yeah.
So maybe season 2 will be, I don't really remember the what happened in the second one, but I have a feeling. And then the third one, I think, is yeah. So if it depends on how fresh your memory is of the meta plot, HA, but I think this
No,
is
I remember
clearly
it. So that's what I'm like. I haven't reread the book, but I maybe should. But there's a lot that was revealed here. So basically,
yeah.
we have this sort of inside network that was implied by Sims in the last episode, but now we see a little bit more about how it's working, which seems to be an incredibly controlling and an underground monitoring system. So things are definitely not as they seem.
Nope.
We've also got Juliet questioning her relationship with George, like what his motivations are. She's definitely been rocked to her core. Like her whole reason for coming up to solve the mystery was her love for George, so much that she's putting herself at risk, kind of wearing her heart on her sleeve or her watch on her sleeve, literally. And so, her motivation for coming up there is totally turned on its end, because I will say
Nothing will do
Regina's
that to you like meeting an ex, huh?
right. I mean, really, Regina's just like giving it to her in this, like just really like, like wheedling her, needling her. She's definitely mad.
That was one of the
And
funnier interviews where like
mhm,
Billings keeps trying to ask her like germane questions, and instead Regina just fires back at
yep.
Jules and is like, "Did he tell you he loved you?" Or like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And from Regina's point of view, she lost everything because of him. And so she really is very bitter. She doesn't even really react when she hears he dies. Like she's like, oh well, whatever, good riddance.
Well, from the stories she's telling, it sounds like he was super manipulative,
Yeah.
and just used her. And so this is the questions I guess that Jules is asking herself, like,
Hmm.
did he use me? But like
Right.
then you're like, well, what did he actually get from Jules? It doesn't,
Her. Right.
yeah. So it's
So
not
so
super clear.
anyways, so but it sort of like, this is the thing that I do think that I think the series has been doing a great job. It's like it is revealing these things, so everything you thought was true is not, and so it's leaving all these mysteries and things that have to be explored. And again, is it too many to wrap up? I don't know, but we shall see. But I thought that was like a very cool way to sort of end out the um this particular episode. It's just like, wow. So everything you thought was sort of a given. Because then it's like, well, how much they must know so much more about everybody. They must have known a lot about Holston. Holston clearly knew enough about them because he kept, these little notes that he wrote about putting more flowers in front of the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Like it implies that he definitely knew that there was a camera monitoring it and that was supposed to block their view.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So I'm again very impressed with the acting, with the writing, and the storytelling in this series. So hopefully they have enough wherewithal to wrap this up in a good way.
Yeah. High hopes, like it's been as I've said, it's been kind of a slow burn, and it's picking up speed as we go through the season. These were 2 interesting episodes. There's so much development happening. It's not though like a all no holds barred sort of brawl every episode,
Mm-mm.
but it's mostly just watching Rebecca Ferguson as like a doomed Duke Leto Atreides sort of
Yeah, a
character.
bit, right? Or
um
it could just be it's got a little bit of a, I don't know, like the way that they handled some of the, I mean, like Holston and there's a bit of a Game of Thrones feel, right? Like
yeah,
that you have this great cast, but you can't be absolutely sure that they're gonna um that they're gonna make it. Like
yeah.
like especially given, and I think that there's always that tension, right?
Wait,
Like
is the Relic the first one where nobody dies? Like it
maybe,
kind of feels like it, right? I mean,
yeah.
it was Rashida Jo it was Allison and Holston, and then Johns and Marnes and Trumbull. So I feel like, yeah, by the time we get to the Relic, I think nobody has died in this episode,
Yeah.
and it's the first time. So Silo just can't get a break. And
But she's definitely, I'm getting some Ned Stark vibes off of her in this, but I guess Holston also had that too, but I don't
yeah,
know.
that's what I
We'll
mean.
see.
I mean, when first season of not Walking Dead, of Game of Thrones, for sure. I mean, it's Sean Bean, so
Hmm.
you're getting Boromir. You're also getting all those kinds of like, oh yeah, he's real noble.
Hmm. A little
everything's
too
gonna go
noble. A little
everything's
too
gonna go great.
noble.
It's gonna go great. But let's wrap it here, and hopefully folks listening along are enjoying the show. God knows we are. We will be back again next time to talk about 7 and 8 Flamekeepers and Hannah. If you want to let us know what you're thinking about the show, give us an email, send it to us, that is at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. You can find our other episodes online at reanimated.podbean.com, and we are on Twitter, mostly there for Hugh Howie's hot takes, at Reanimated PCast. So thank you for listening, and ciao.
Hey, you took my line.
And goodbye.
Until next time. Bye-bye.